The crowd roared inside the massive stone arena of the Zereth Empire. Thousands of aliens filled the seats, cheering and laughing as drums echoed across the sky. Today was a special event. A human, a weak, earthborn creature, was going to fight in front of their queen. High on her golden throne, the alien queen sat with a proud smirk. Her eyes, glowing a deep violet, watched as the human was pushed into the arena. He wore worn-out armor and carried no visible weapon. His face was calm, eyes sharp, scanning everything. "Is this what Earth calls a warrior?" the queen said, laughing. "I asked for a challenge, not a sacrifice." The nobles laughed with her. Many leaned forward, waiting to see the human fall quickly. To them, it was entertainment. To the human, it was something else. The announcer, a tall alien with a mechanical voice, stepped forward. "From the wilds of Earth, we present the challenger, a human with no title, no name, no past." The human didn't react. He simply stood in place as the ground shook. The gate on the far side of the arena opened with a loud grind. A massive alien warrior stepped out, muscles like steel, skin covered in dark green scales, carrying a double blade taller than the human himself. The queen leaned forward with excitement. "Let's see how long he lasts." 1 minute. Perhaps less. The bell rang. The alien warrior charged forward with a roar, swinging his weapon like thunder. The crowd cheered louder, expecting the human to be crushed. But the human moved. He didn't run. He stepped sideways with speed and balance. The alien missed. Before the warrior could turn, the human rolled behind him and kicked the back of his leg. It wasn't strong, but it made the alien stumble. The crowd fell quiet for a moment. The alien swung again. This time, the human ducked and slapped sand into his opponent's eyes. The warrior roared in anger. He swung wildly now, and the human used it, dodging, moving, wearing him out. Then, with a sharp move, the human grabbed the alien's arm and twisted it. The weapon dropped. Gasps filled the arena. The human kicked the weapon away, then stood tall. The alien was on the ground, groaning. The bell rang again. Silence. The queen's smile faded. Her champion had fallen, and the human wasn't even breathing hard. No fancy armor, no energy shield, just skill and calm. The human looked up at the queen, his face still calm. "I came here for more than a fight," he said loudly. The arena stayed quiet. No one laughed anymore. The queen narrowed her eyes, but said nothing. Inside, she felt something strange, something rare. It was the first time in years she felt unsure. The queen didn't like being surprised, especially not by a human. Her fingers tapped against her throne's armrest. She stared down at the earthborn warrior standing in the arena, untouched, as if the fight hadn't even happened. Around her, nobles whispered. Some looked confused, others nervous. The crowd didn't cheer. They waited, watching the queen's reaction. She slowly rose from her seat, her voice cold but loud. "You survived, my weakest warrior." Impressive. For a human. The human didn't respond. He just waited. The queen's eyes narrowed. "Let's test you again. This time, no time limit. No mercy." She raised her hand and pointed at the far gate. Released the blade shade. Gasps echoed across the crowd. Blade Shade wasn't just a warrior. She was known for speed and precision. Her blades could cut stone. Many challengers had fallen to her within seconds. The gate opened. Out stepped a tall alien woman, dressed in black armor that shimmered under the sun. She had 2 sharp energy blades on her back and silver eyes that locked onto the human immediately. She didn't speak. She just moved like a shadow, quick, silent, deadly. The human watched her carefully. He didn't look afraid, only alert. The bell rang. Blade Shade charge, her blades out in seconds, slashing at the human with deadly skill. The audience gasped as her strikes came fast. Too fast to see clearly. But the human ducked, stepped aside, and rolled. He moved with strange rhythm, like he was dancing instead of fighting. Then he surprised her. He didn't attack with strength, but with cleverness. He kicked up dust into her face, then moved low, sweeping her legs. Bladeshade stumbled but didn't fall. She slashed back, cutting through part of his armor, but the human was already gone, circling around her again. She growled. No one had made her miss this much before. They fought like lightning and storm, her attacks sharp and wild, his movements calm and patient. He never tried to overpower her. He waited, timed, and finally found his moment. Bladeshade lunged. He dodged and grabbed her arm mid-strike. With a quick twist, he forced her to the ground and kicked one of her blades away. The bell rang again. The arena was silent. The queen's face was unreadable, but her mind was racing. 2 of her warriors had lost. Both were trained killers. And this human, he hadn't even drawn a weapon. The nobles now looked at each other, some whispering with concern. One of the queen's advisors leaned close and whispered, "Perhaps he is not what he seems." She didn't reply. Below, the human looked up at the queen again. This time, he smiled. And the queen, for the first time in many cycles, felt something unusual in her chest. Doubt. The arena remained quiet long after the second fight ended. The human stood alone in the center, calm and steady. He didn't raise his arms or celebrate. He just waited, like a soldier ready for the next order. Around him, the aliens in the stands sat in silence, unsure how to feel. Inside the royal box, the queen turned away from the crowd and walked toward her private chamber. Her advisors followed closely, their faces tight with worry. The queen's steps were sharp, her mind filled with questions. "How is this possible?" she finally asked, her voice low but cold. One of the generals stepped forward. "He uses strange movements, not like any fighter we've seen before. He avoids brute force. He studies the opponent, then strikes only when sure." The queen frowned. "A coward's style." "Or a survivor's," said another voice. Everyone turned. It was the queen's niece, a noblewoman named Ilari. She was younger than the others, dressed in light armor instead of royal robes. Her silver eyes were thoughtful. "You noticed something?" the queen asked. Ilari nodded. "He doesn't fight like a gladiator. He fights like someone who has survived real war, real pain. He waits, he learns, and he doesn't waste energy." The queen didn't like the sound of that. "Do you think Earth trains all its warriors this way?" Ilari paused. "I think we've never truly studied Earth. We've laughed at them for too long. Perhaps they're not weak, just different." The queen didn't respond. She moved to a large screen in the wall and ordered it to show the fight again. Frame by frame, they watched the human's movements. Every dodge, every shift in weight, every glance at the terrain. He wasn't lucky. He was planning every move. "He made her fall," one advisor whispered. "Without cutting her," said another. The queen stared at the screen. The image froze on the moment the human looked up at her. That calm, unreadable expression. No fear, no pride. Only confidence. "We will not let fear spread," the queen said finally. "He will fight again. We will send the best this time. The champion." Gasps filled the room. The champion was the most feared warrior in the empire, not just strong, but enhanced with alien technology. No one had ever lasted more than 10 seconds against him. Ilari stepped forward again. "Be careful, my queen. If the human wins again, the people may no longer see him as a joke. They might see him as something greater." The queen turned slowly. "Then we make sure he does not win." Back in the arena, guards approached the human and told him the next match would be at first light. He simply nodded. As he was led away, he noticed Ilari watching from a high balcony. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. The sun was low in the sky as the arena buzzed with anticipation. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands once again, eagerly awaiting the next fight. The air was thick with tension, heavier than ever. The Queen's gaze was locked onto the arena floor below, her fingers tapping nervously on the armrest of her throne. This time, she had prepared differently. The champion was no ordinary fighter. He was a living weapon, enhanced with cybernetic technology. No human, or any alien for that matter, had ever stood a chance against him. Today, the Queen was certain the Earthborn would be no exception. As the bell rang, the champion entered the arena. His massive frame towered over the human, who was standing calmly at the far end, adjusting his worn armor. The champion's eyes were cold and glowing with artificial energy, his metallic limbs shining under the arena lights. He was built for destruction, and he looked it. His presence alone was enough to make the audience shiver with excitement. The Queen smiled. "Prepare to be humbled, human," she muttered under her breath. The human didn't flinch. He simply sized up his opponent, his face calm but focused. His eyes never left the champion's, studying every movement, every breath. The fight began with a roar. The champion charged forward, his heavy footsteps shaking the ground beneath him. His arms swung with deadly intent, aimed straight at the human's chest. But the human didn't meet the attack head-on. Instead, he sidestepped, barely avoiding the first blow, and ducked under the second. The crowd gasped. It was like watching a predator chase a shadow. The champion swung again, this time with a crushing blow meant to shatter bones. But the human didn't run. He didn't panic. He dropped to the ground and rolled away, using the arena's terrain to his advantage. He was small, light on his feet, and far more agile than the champion had expected. The Queen's smile faded slightly as she watched. "He's fast," she muttered, narrowing her eyes. For the next few minutes, the human danced around the champion, avoiding each strike with incredible skill. The champion's rage grew with every failed blow, his movements becoming more erratic, more desperate. The human stayed calm, never overcommitting to an attack, always staying just out of reach. He made the champion burn through his energy reserves. Finally, after a missed strike, the human saw his chance. As the champion overextended himself, the human grabbed his arm and twisted it behind him. The massive warrior stumbled, losing his balance. In a blur of motion, the human kicked his opponent's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The champion groaned, his strength failing him. He tried to rise, but the human had already stepped back, watching carefully. The bell rang. The arena fell silent. For the first time, the Queen's face showed the smallest hint of doubt. She had underestimated him again. The human didn't celebrate. He simply turned and walked out of the arena, his steps steady, his mission clear. But as he left, he looked up at the Queen in her box, and he smiled. The Queen's throne room was filled with silence as her advisors stood nervously in front of her. The image of the human's victory still burned in their minds. Her champion, the best of her fighters, had failed. It was unthinkable. The Queen was not used to losing. She was a ruler who had conquered entire galaxies, her power absolute. But this human, this Earthborn warrior, was different. His calm, his strategy, his patience had turned the tide. It was something she had not seen before. "Prepare the champion for the final battle," the Queen ordered, her voice cold and sharp. Her decision was made. There would be no more mistakes. Her advisors exchanged worried glances. The champion was unlike any fighter they had. Enhanced by alien technology, stronger and faster than any living being, he was the perfect soldier. There was no way the human could survive another fight. But the Queen wasn't worried about survival anymore. She wanted the human broken. She wanted him to learn that no one, no matter how skilled, could defy her empire. The time for games was over. The champion was led into the arena. His massive, muscular frame gleamed under the lights, and his eyes burned with intensity. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a living weapon, his body fused with technology. Nothing could stop him. The crowd roared in excitement as the human walked to the center of the arena. This time, there was no laughter, no mocking. The tension was thick in the air. Everyone knew this would be the final test. The queen watched from her seat, her gaze fixed on the human. She didn't know why, but a small feeling of unease crawled under her skin. The human's calmness, his unshaken confidence, it unnerved her. The bell rang. The champion charged forward with blinding speed. His fist swung like a hammer, aimed straight at the human's chest. The human didn't move immediately. He stood still for a moment, almost as if he was waiting. Then, in the blink of an eye, he moved. He ducked, narrowly avoiding the champion's strike. The human rolled to the side, getting behind the champion in an instant. It was a move no one had expected. The champion tried to turn, but the human was already gone again, moving like a ghost, quick and unpredictable. The crowd was on edge. The champion's strength was overwhelming, but the human's speed and tactics were wearing him down. Blow after blow, the human dodged and countered, using every opening to strike the champion's weak points. The queen leaned forward in her throne. This wasn't how she had planned it. The human was not fighting out of strength, but out of skill, intelligence, and pure will. He had no fear. He didn't need brute power. He knew how to fight smarter. The champion's attacks grew slower. He was exhausted. He had underestimated the human. He had underestimated Earth. Finally, the champion made a fatal mistake. As he lunged forward with a wide, desperate strike, the human stepped aside and grabbed his arm. With a twist, the human sent the champion crashing to the ground, unable to rise. The bell rang again. The arena was silent. The queen stood. Her heart raced as she looked down at the human. He was unscathed, standing tall, waiting for her response. The crowd stared, and whispers filled the air. The queen clenched her fists. She was angry, but now she was more than that. She was afraid. The human had made her question everything. She took a deep breath. "Send in the champion again," she ordered, though her voice was quieter this time. But deep down she knew this human might be more than just a fighter. He might be the start of something no one could control. The queen's chambers were silent, except for the quiet hum of the power cores beneath the floor. Her advisors stood in the shadows, their faces tense with uncertainty. The human had done the impossible. Twice now, he had defeated her greatest warriors. She would not allow it to happen again. Her gaze shifted from the window to the arena below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the sand. Tonight, the champion would fight again. This time, there would be no room for error. The queen's orders were clear. This human would fall. As the gates of the arena opened, the crowd roared. Their excitement filled the air, but there was no laughter this time. They knew what was coming. The champion stepped out into the arena, his eyes glowing with energy. His massive body moved with calculated precision, each step thunderous. His enhanced muscles rippled beneath his armored plating. He had failed twice, but tonight, there would be no mercy. The queen had ensured that he was ready. Across from him, the human stood, his worn armor still intact, his expression calm. He had no weapon. He didn't need one. He had already proven that strength alone could not defeat him. The bell rang. The champion charged. The human didn't move at first. He studied the champion carefully, eyes focused. The champion's speed was incredible. He was like a storm, smashing through the air with punches and strikes that could break through steel. Yet, the human remained patient, waiting for his opening. The first blow came, swift and powerful. The human sidestepped, feeling the air move as the fist barely missed him. The ground cracked where it hit. The champion's roar filled the arena as he swung again, this time with a force that could shatter bone. But the human ducked low, slipping under the strike, and came up behind the champion. He didn't attack. He only observed. Again and again, the champion swung. Each attack was deadly. Each miss, though, cost him more. The human darted to the side, using every movement to avoid the overwhelming strength of the champion's blows. The crowd began to murmur. There was something different about this human. With every move, the human wore the champion down. The champion's breaths grew heavier. His movements were slower. His strikes, once sharp, were becoming desperate. The human stayed light on his feet, his energy conserved, watching the champion tire. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the human made his move. As the champion lunged with a wild, exhausted punch, the human dodged, then grabbed the champion's arm, twisting it behind his back. The champion howled in pain, trying to break free, but the human was faster. With one final, precise move, the human kicked the champion's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. The bell rang again. This time, the crowd was completely silent. They had watched a monster fall. The queen stood, her hands clenched into fists. She had underestimated him. Twice. The human didn't even look at the champion lying defeated on the ground. He simply turned and walked toward the exit. As the human left the arena, the queen's eyes followed him. This time, though, there was no mocking smile on her lips, only a deep, unsettling feeling. This human was no longer just a fighter. He was something more. And that thought terrified her. The silence in the arena was deafening. The crowd remained frozen in place, unable to speak or even move. The human had done the impossible again. He had defeated the champion, the most feared warrior in the galaxy. The once proud arena, filled with the sounds of roars and cheers, now stood still. The queen, still standing in her private box, didn't know how to react. Her face was a mask of anger, but behind her eyes was something far deeper, something she rarely let herself feel. Fear. Her mind raced with thoughts. How could this be happening? How could a mere human, without the power of technology, defeat her best fighters? The champion had been enhanced with the most advanced alien tech. He was practically a living weapon. And yet, he had fallen. Twice. "Your Majesty," one of her generals said, stepping forward cautiously. "What do you want to do now?" This has never happened before." The queen turned sharply, her cold gaze settling on the general. "What do you think? This human is a threat. We can't let him walk away again. We will crush him once and for all." "But, Your Majesty," the general hesitated, his voice full of concern. "Perhaps we should reconsider. The people are beginning to talk. The defeat of the champion has shaken the empire. If we continue, there could be consequences." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Consequences? Do you think I am afraid of consequences? This is an insult. This human is a symbol of weakness. We cannot allow that to spread." "But the people," the general started, only to be cut off by a sharp gesture from the queen. "Enough," she snapped. "We will send in our best. The general of the fleet will meet him in the arena. This time, there will be no mercy." As the queen turned her back on her advisors, her niece, Ilari, stepped forward. Her eyes held a thoughtful expression, different from the others in the room. "Are you sure, Aunt? This human, he isn't like the others. He's not just fighting for glory or power. He fights because he believes he can win." The queen paused, her back still to the room. Ilari's words lingered in her mind, but she didn't show any sign of doubt. "He's a human. They are nothing compared to us. No matter how clever, no matter how strong, they will always be weaker. We will break him, Ilari. I promise you." Ilari didn't argue. She had seen the doubt in her aunt's eyes. She had seen it in the way the queen had watched the human walk away from his last victory. It was subtle, but it was there. Back in the arena, the human was escorted out. His face remained calm, but there was a new fire in his eyes. He knew the fight wasn't over. The queen would send her best, but that didn't matter. He had defeated her warriors already, and he knew that his victory was more than just physical, it was mental. As he walked through the corridors, He could hear the whispers of the alien soldiers. They spoke in their strange language, but he could understand their fear. They didn't know how to deal with someone like him. He was human, and that was more than enough. The moon hung high over the arena, casting a pale light on the arena's dusty sands. Inside, the human warrior stood quietly in the center. His face was calm, but his mind was sharp, prepared for whatever the queen had planned next. He had already defeated her strongest warriors. He had proven himself more than capable. But this time, the stakes felt different. He could sense the tension in the air. The crowd was quieter than before, their anticipation heavy. This was it. The queen was sending her best, her personal champion, a being unlike any other. The human wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to prove something bigger, to show the Zereth Empire that humans were more than just weak, fragile creatures. A loud clang echoed through the arena as the gates opened. The queen's personal champion stepped forward. This warrior was a living machine, every part of his body enhanced with cybernetic technology. His face was hidden behind a metallic mask, and his body glowed with power. He moved with precision, as if every step was calculated. His energy was palpable, his very presence intimidating. The human warrior stood tall, his eyes focused. He knew this would be his hardest fight yet. The champion was stronger, faster, and had the technology to crush him in seconds. But the human wasn't going to back down. The bell rang. The champion charged, his steps thundering across the arena. The human didn't move at first. He stood still, watching. The champion swung a fist, powerful and fast, but the human sidestepped with ease, barely moving out of the way. His movements were smooth, almost like a dance. The champion growled in frustration, attacking again and again, each blow faster than the last. The human dodged every strike, using his agility to stay one step ahead. The champion's frustration grew. He was getting tired. Each failed attempt to land a hit only drained him further. And the human, he just kept moving, never tiring, never rushing. Finally, the champion lunged. This time, the human didn't dodge. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. With a quick twist of his wrist, he grabbed the champion's arm and threw him to the ground. The crowd gasped in disbelief. The champion lay on the sand, stunned but not yet beaten. The human stood over him, breathing steady, his face unreadable. He had done it again. He had outsmarted the most powerful warrior in the arena. The queen's eyes widened in shock, and for the first time in the entire battle, she felt a pang of fear. As the human walked towards the edge of the arena, he looked up at the queen's box. Their eyes met. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't boasting. He simply stood there, unshaken, his expression calm. The queen clenched her fists, her heart racing. This human had done the impossible. Again. She had underestimated him every time, and it had cost her. She stood up from her throne, her eyes never leaving the human. Enough, she whispered to herself, though the words were meant for her people. This fight was far from over. The news spread quickly, faster than the queen could control it. Word of the humans' victories reached every corner of the Zereth Empire. The whispers started small, but they grew louder with each passing moment. Every planet, every city, every noble house was talking about the Earthborn warrior who had defeated the Queen's champions twice. The Queen sat alone in her private chambers, staring out over the galaxy. The stars shimmered in the distance, but they seemed cold to her now. Every victory by the human had cracked something inside her. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was beginning to feel something else. Fear. She had never feared anyone, never felt the weight of uncertainty. She ruled with absolute power, and yet this human, this insignificant creature from Earth, had managed to break through her defenses. He had exposed her weaknesses. In the Grand Hall, her advisors met in secret. The air was thick with tension as they discussed their next move. "We cannot allow this to continue," one of the generals said, his voice low. "If this human keeps winning, our reputation will be shattered." The empire could fall apart. Another advisor nodded. The people are starting to believe in him. They see him as a symbol, a hero. If he keeps defeating our greatest warriors, they'll start questioning everything. The Queen's authority will weaken, said the third, fear creeping into his voice. Others will rise. If we lose control, there could be uprisings across the galaxy. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she listened from the shadows. Her advisors were right. She had never considered what might happen if the people began to see the human as something more than a joke. Her grip on the empire was slipping. One of her top military commanders, a female warrior named Zara, stepped forward. Your Majesty, we have one final option. We can send in the Veer. They are stronger than any of our current warriors. They were bred for battle, and they've never lost. If we send the Veer to face him, it will be over. This human will not survive. The Queen stood slowly, her eyes cold. The Veer, do you truly believe that will work? Her voice was sharp, like a blade. Zara didn't flinch. The Veer are not only powerful, they are relentless. No one has ever withstood them. The Queen paused, considering the offer. She had relied on strength, on fear, to maintain control. But this human was different. He had no fear, and that was what scared her the most. She turned away from the group, her mind racing. The human had outsmarted her warriors. He had made a fool of her. The people were starting to believe in him. There was only one way to stop this: destroy the symbol he had become. Prepare the Veer, she finally ordered. This human will be made an example of. No more games. Her advisors nodded and quickly left to carry out her command. The Queen stood by the window, looking at the stars. Her heart pounded. She could no longer afford to underestimate this human. The time for mercy was over. The arena had never felt more tense. The sky above was dark, and the air crackled with anticipation. The Queen had sent the Veer, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, to face the human. This was the final test. There would be no more mercy, no more surprises. It was time for the human to fall. In the shadows, the Queen stood in her private box, watching as the Veer entered the arena. They were massive, their bodies cloaked in dark armor that seemed to absorb the light. Their eyes glowed with an eerie intensity, and their movements were precise, like machines designed for one purpose: destruction. This would be the end of the human warrior. The human, as always, stood in the center of the arena, his face calm. He didn't flinch when the Veer entered. He didn't even blink. He simply waited. The bell rang. Without a word, the Veer attacked. Their speed was terrifying. They moved like shadows, faster than anything the human had faced before. Their weapons were long, sharp, and designed for lethal efficiency. The human dodged the first strike, but the Veer didn't slow down. They kept coming, relentless, never giving him a chance to breathe. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human continued to evade them, his movements sharp and calculated. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually succeed in dodging their attacks. But the Veer were relentless. Their strikes grew faster and more unpredictable. One Veer swung his weapon, and for the first time, it cut the human's armor. A shallow wound appeared on his shoulder, but the human didn't slow down. The Queen felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this would finally be the moment when the human fell. But she underestimated him again. With a sudden, unexpected move, the human grabbed one of the Veer's weapons, using it against its wielder. He twisted the Veer's arm, sending it sprawling to the ground. In one fluid motion, the human turned and used the fallen weapon to block the next strike from the other Veer. The crowd gasped. The human didn't just survive, he fought back. For the next few minutes, the human and the Veer clashed in an incredible display of skill and power. Every strike from the Veer was blocked or dodged. Every counterattack from the human landed with precision. He wasn't stronger than the Veer, but he was smarter. He used their own power against them, letting them tire themselves out. Then, as the final Veer launched a desperate attack, the human ducked under the blow and disarmed the warrior in a single motion. He didn't hesitate. With a swift kick, he sent the bear to the ground, immobilizing it. The arena was silent again. The queen stood in shock. She had sent her best, her most powerful warriors, and the human had defeated them all. The symbol of his power was clear. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a force. The human turned to face the queen's box. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stood there, staring up at her. In that moment, something shifted in the queen's heart. She realized the truth. Her empire was not invincible. And this human, this earthborn warrior, had proven it. The queen's grip on her throne tightened. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure: this human had changed everything.